Today we'll be talking about the Escalera 2.0 program evaluation and impact. My name is Victor Steenbergen. I'm from the London School of Economics, and with me I have Alison Hamburg from Columbia University. We'll be talking a little bit about the impact of the program. So first of all, let's look at a general overview of program impacts. And afterwards we'll also be looking throughout for the impacts by grade as well as gender, as well as checking whether there is a difference according to student ability and the treatment impact. Subsequently, Alison will be talking a little bit about the factors of impact, perhaps the primary reason that the program has an impact on test scores is, for example, through teacher attendance or parent involvement. And lastly, Alison will talk a little bit about a comparison with other programs. Right, starting with the overall impact table, here we see the general impact across all three grades for both math scores, reading scores, and a combined score of the two. We also see a breakdown of the total impact as well as broken down for males and females. So, for example, if we look at the first box here for total and combined together, we see that, generally speaking, there is a 4.16% higher test score for schools in treatment areas than schools in control groups. The two most important things when reading this table are firstly the size of the treatment effect and secondly the level of significance. The size here you see ranges around about 4 percentage points in terms of impact on test scores, but you also see that there are stars behind every coefficient. This signifies the level of confidence that we have in the particular estimates. When there are 3 stars behind a particular estimate, it means we're 99% sure that what we measured is significantly different from 0. If there are 2 stars, it's at the 95% level, and if there's 1 star, it's at the 90% level. It also means if there are no stars, this means we cannot be certain that there is any treatment impact. Alright, so to summarize, we see that for the general overall impact, the treatment effect is around 4 percentage points in both maths as well as reading. And another interesting thing is that we see a slightly higher impact for males than females. Alright, moving on to impact by grade. Here we actually see that grade 1 and 2 have a significantly different impact from grade 3. There are 2 main reasons why we would expect such a difference to occur. First of all, people in grade 1 and grade 2 are obviously younger, so that might impact their effort. But also, as was explained earlier by Brian, the program gives out different incentives for different grades. So first and second grades receive material incentives such as MP3 players, books and laptops, while third graders receive financial incentives, scholarships. Now moving to the impacts by grades, we see that grade 1 only has a statistically significant impact for women and only in maths, which is a 3.12 percentage point increase for treatment schools over control schools. For grade 2, we only observe a statistically significant impact for men and only in mathematics, once again, which is a very large 7.24 percentage points higher in treatment schools than in control schools. And lastly, for grade 3, we see that there is an impact for both males and females and both mathematics and reading. Alright, proceeding now to the table for grade 3 and looking at the overall impacts across third grade, we see that the most important thing here is the impacts are statistically significant. The size of the impact lies between 3.5 and about just over 8 percentage points. And a last thing to note here is we see slightly higher impacts for reading than for mathematics. Alright, Lastly, we also be talking a little bit about the impact by student ability. So there are always going to be differences within the class for high performers and low performers, and a lot of previous studies have found that incentive programs that give incentives to high performers only actually only have an impact on students who already have high scores. To check whether this was the case in our study, we actually looked at both the impact for students that had a very low test score and the impact for students that had a very high test score. And we actually found that there is a statistically significant, very similar result for both groups. And we believe that this might be because, as Brian explained earlier, there is a mix of incentives of the most increase in performance as well as the highest grades that you would receive. These incentivize both grades, both types of performers, and as a result we see a significant impact for both. We also lastly see here that the impact is slightly different for mathematics as broken down for reading, which suggests that low-performing students might focus slightly more on mathematics, whereas high-performing students focus their attention slightly more on reading. Alison will now talk a little bit about the indirect treatment effects of the program.
Great, so now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the ways that we found the program to have an impact aside from just the impact on student effort. So basically what we found was that the program led to an improvement in teacher attendance as well as teacher effort. What we see here is the difference between the treatment and the control groups. First, looking at teacher attendance in the percentage of students who reported that their teacher was absent 3 days or fewer in the last 4 weeks. And so what we see is that actually the treatment group has a 15% higher chance of reporting that their teacher was absent 3 days or fewer. We also see, when looking at the percentage of students that reported whether their teacher always or almost always asked if their students understood the topic that they were covering, we also see that the treatment group had a higher percentage of students agreeing with that statement. So moving on to the next impact, we also found that the program has an impact on parental involvement in their children's education. So what we see here is when looking at whether students reported that their parents had attended a school meeting in the past year, we again see a higher percentage of students in the treatment group reporting their parents' attendance at a meeting. Both of these impacts for teachers and parents really highlight the importance of both teachers and parents in their students' success. So here we show just a brief diagram demonstrating the pathways that we believe, given our results, the program impacts student overall achievement. So we see here offering the incentive program has a direct effect leading to increased student effort, but also has indirect effects on parent and teacher effort, and both of those together lead to increased overall student achievement in the treatment group. Now we also conducted an analysis looking specifically at gender, and what we found was that overall there's a higher impact for boys, but when looking at grade 3 we find a higher impact for girls. We believe that one of the possible reasons why we see this difference centers around the topic of parental support for girls and boys. So what we saw was that when looking at scores for the control group, there was a higher percentage of boys who reported that their parents had attended a school meeting, which might indicate that these male students, they receive higher parental support, and that might explain why there's a higher impact for boys overall as compared to girls. But interestingly, what we saw is that as a result of the program, there was a higher increase in parental support for girls than for boys. So when we look at the scores for the treatment group, we see that there was an 11% increase in parental support reported by female students compared to just about a 5% increase for boys. And we believe that this higher increase for female students might partially explain why girls in grade 3, why we see higher improvement compared to boys. So now, briefly, what we have is a comparison of the STAR program with several other well-researched education programs in other developing and developed countries. What we see here, we've converted our measurements into a standard form that allows us to compare across programs, and we see that the STAR program comes out near the top. So the impact that the STAR program had, the impact that we found of approximately 4%, is very comparable to other education programs that have been researched, and in fact it's near the top. So our impact is relatively comparable. So finally, just to conclude our presentation of the impacts of the STAR Program 2.0 evaluation, we found that there was a greater impact for males compared to females, and also a greater impact on math scores compared to reading scores. Also, given that we found higher impacts in 3rd grade, we believe that this may indicate that scholarships are more highly valued than the non-monetary prizes awarded in the 1st and 2nd grade. It's also important to note that we found an impact across all student ability levels, which reflects the balance of mechanisms for winning awards. And we found additional impacts for teachers and parents, which point out indirect channels of influence on student achievement. Finally, we noted that the impact of the STAR program is quite comparable with other education programs. And that concludes our presentation of the results.
Thank you very much.